be included in the May revise. We noted in the LAO report, every single budget priority that we had from last year was actually listed as an option from LAO to defund, basically to satisfy the additional $15 billion that was noted that is continuing our deficit. And so we will work within the environment we are, and we'll be sure to make sure we work with our colleagues to prioritize investments in Black Californians. As it relates to what is the 3-year plan, we expect, as was, I believe it was stated here, but I know it was stated in a number of interviews, to work through 3 to 10 years to get most of these across the finish line. The 3-year plan comes from the fact that we have this governor remaining for 3 years. And he and his office have been collaborative with us throughout this entire process, and we expect that to continue during his tenure. In regard to direct cash payments to individuals, we will continue to have that discussion as we navigate the next few years. As noted, we're halfway through a legislative session. That means we have about 3 months of the legislative process in each house to work through these existing bills. In our next session, we have 2 years. And during that 2-year session, we will consider over the fall, concluding additional payments, whether they be direct cash payments or direct payments to communities. But really it's going to take us as a caucus considering what is best in the budget environment, as well as we work through the constitutional framework that we exist in that still needs addressing, as Dr. Corey Jackson noted with ACA 7.
Just in response to that question as a whole, I think this has been a longer than a 3-year process already. We are already 200 years late. It's a 400-year process. We have some members of this caucus who are on a 1-year timeline before they turn out. There are a number of us who have nearly a decade. And so this is going to be a framework of legislation that we continue to put forward until all of the work is done. But of course, cash transfers has to be a core part of that conversation. Yesterday, we had a House resolution in the Assembly where we talked about Japanese internment camps here in California and the reparations that occurred thereafter, direct cash compensation. Here in California, we have done cash compensation before for harms. For example, the harm during COVID resulted in a Golden State stimulus check. You all remember the card with the California Golden Bear just a couple of years ago, direct cash to all Californians. We know how to get money out the door to repair harm. We're experiencing the worst budget deficit the state of California has ever had, but make no mistake, we cannot have a full reparations conversation without talking about direct compensation for that harm. But that conversation is ongoing, and a huge, momentous way to keep that conversation alive is to pass this priority bill package this year and to continue to build on that work.
Chair Wilson, were you guys split on the decision to
Hold on 1 second, let me get the gentleman behind me, and then I'll go to you.
Yes, thank you. If you had to rank each legislation that you presented here today, or most of them, what would be the top 3 priorities? I know I don't think we have talked about SB 490, the apology, we just spoke about education.
Of our reparations priorities package, there are 14. The first one is awareness, which is ACR 135. The second one is apology, which is AB 3089, and then it's all the rest. Simple as that.
Yeah, and this is my last question too. You got 80 assembly members, you have 40 senators. How would you navigate, to build a relationship with them to get them to understand and educate and support these legislation?
Well, although we have 80 assembly members, we need 41. And we have, 40 senators, we just need 21. And so we will work to build a coalition around this, ensuring we educate our colleagues on this subject. They were all given the final report last June. We hope they are taking time to read it and digest it. But we also have an education tour planned led by Assemblymember Tina McKenna, who will work to ensure we not only educate members of our colleagues, but other members of the public as well. We have our State of Black California tour and conversation that is led by Senator Lola Smallwood Cuevas that will work to galvanize the community around these particular subjects and ensure that not only are our legislators informed, but the members in their district are informed as well. And we know that part of the work of a legislator is listen to their constituents. So we want to make sure our constituents are educated so they can speak out to their legislator. Here, here, and here.
Thanks for taking our questions. I'm just curious, was the caucus split on the decision to not introduce legislation this year that would give out cash payments? And did the governor give you a heads up or directly talk to the caucus about not doing that this year?
So I'll bring over Assemblymember Bryan again to address, but I'll start with the caucus is united. We're unified in our package that we put forth, and we were unified in the bills that we decided to put forth as a caucus. And like I noted, several members of the caucus have introduced bills to start discussions around key components of reparations. And we all have been in the legislature for a moment long enough to know that sometimes it takes multiple conversations for our colleagues to get where they need to be able to vote and support our reparations package or measures in general.
I think the chair spoke to this correct. We are unified. There are 12 black members in the entire state legislature. There have been less than 70 black members who have ever served in this building. There were some early black members in this building who weren't allowed to stay in hotels in Sacramento even after they were sworn into this building. And so we're very cognizant of the legacies we stand on and the work that we have to do. And so we, of course, came unified. And the governor has been a very willing and able partner to talk through this package. We met with him as recently as last week. The community's calls for immediate direct compensation are not lost on us. The pragmatic realities of governing and legislating in the largest budget deficit in the history of California is also not lost on us. We also know that the budget crisis of today is not necessarily the budget crisis of tomorrow. It certainly wasn't the budget crisis of yesterday when we had $100 billion surplus. And so we've got our work cut out for us, but we're committed to doing that together every step of the way.
I think it's very important that we understand when we talk about cash payments, the systemic environment that we find ourselves in. Today, if a upper middle class parent has a child, the likelihood that that child would stay in the upper middle class is very slim. Just because one generation in our current systemic environment in this nation and in the state, right now, just because one generation makes it, the environment right now does not allow for all future generations to continue to make progress. So the question becomes, if we're going to honor our ancestors, which is always about the next generation, not just about me, it's about us and our children. What good is a cash payment if it's only going to benefit one generation? Right? And so which is why part of our package, we have some systemic constitutional amendments, some things, again, one of the cornerstones of our reparation package is to clear the way of legal barriers, of systemic barriers, to ensure that if the work we do now will last another 100 years. And so, we hear you. I want some money right now. But the question becomes, will our grandchildren benefit from me getting that money?
Yes. That's it.
So we are trying to also honor our ancestors and the wisdom that they have brought forth to ensure that we are doing right. And sometimes doing what's right doesn't mean doing what's immediate. And so we are going to take our time, and we are going to make sure that the work that we do here lasts far longer than our time on this earth.
Thank you. There, and then there.
Thank you. As we all remember, the hurdles that ACA is regarding indentured servitude and slavery in prisons. ACA 3 faced pushback from the Department of Finance saying that it would cost, removing slavery from the Constitution would cost too much. Is ACA 8 facing that same pushback? And should removing slavery have to be justified from arguments that it costs too much?
Involuntary servitude is a loss of human dignity. Our current incarcerated persons are experiencing a loss of human dignity. I am an accounting person. That is my background, accounting and finance. I care about the dollars and cents.
Well,
But when it comes to human dignity, dollars and cents don't factor in. Simple as that. So yes, there are conversations surrounding it, and we are getting from our colleagues the same conversation, from some of our colleagues, the same conversation that then Senator Sidney Comlander Dove had. But we will overcome that, because at the end of the day, dollars and cents cannot matter when it comes to human dignity.
Thank
you. So here, and then there, and then there.
Yeah, can you please talk about how you all arrived at this particular bill package, how you selected these priority bills, and then, I mean, the task force had hundreds of recommendations, so, and if there's gonna be a 10-year effort, do you have an estimate of how many bills might come out of this report?
Right. Dr. Jackson, Dr. Weber, either one of you want to?
As we began to look at it, we formed a committee to look at all the recommendations. And at first, we whittled down over 100 recommendations in the task force to about 30-something, and then 30-something on down. And the idea is, what could be done now? And I think as you continue to see more LAO projections, that we are a very wise caucus when it comes to making sure that we maintain a sense of discipline on ensuring that we just don't do something, like don't have anything to show for it. But then also making sure that we understand that if it's in the task force recommendations, they're all important, right? It's like saying what scripture is not important in the Bible, right? They all are. And we wanted to make sure that they covered a wide range of issues. And as you see, we have done that, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's criminal justice, right? Whether it's wealth. But the idea is we wanted to make sure that we covered a wide range of issues, but then we also were cognizant of the barriers that we might face this year, but still move the needle forward, right? Remember, we're setting the foundation this year for all the work that continues on in the process, right? Scripture tells us you gotta count the cost, right? Which means that you have to understand what is necessary, what foundation do we need to lay now that will allow for even more success into the future. And I think that's what we've been able to do this year. You want to?
Well, I agree with what Assemblymember Corey Jackson said. We were very deliberate in our decisions at the caucus. I also want to highlight what our chair said. These are our 14 priority bills, but there are many members who are carrying other bills that are part of the recommendations from the Reparations Task Force. And I encourage all of you to continue to look at all of our bills and to support, as we will support all of those bills. They're just not a part of the priority. You know, our responsibility is not lost on any of us. And we talked about that a lot when we were deciding which bills we would choose. In addition to, as has been stated, our financial constraints right now, but also the lack of education and the work that we have to do amongst ourselves, amongst our colleagues, and more importantly, amongst Californians. And that's why we are approaching this from a variety of different ways. We're approaching this from, yes, the bills that we have. We're approaching this from the different budget asks that we will have. But the education and communication component is key. Because as someone else stated here, there are 80 members of the Assembly and 40 of the Senate. And we have to get a majority in both houses to vote on these bills so that we can get them to the governor's desk. And that's gonna take educating them, that's gonna take educating their communities, so that their communities can also put pressure on their members to support these individual things. And so this is really truly laying down the foundation, as so many people have said before. there's a lot of work, there's a lot of misinformation out there. I am a Californian, born and raised, and I thought all these issues happened in the South. I had no idea of the things that California had done, the things that our elected officials had done, the way in which we have been viewed and continue to be viewed in this state. And so there's a lot of education that must be done initially. And so these bills are wide, they touch on a lot of different areas, but it also allows us the ability to have wins coming out so that we don't come out of the gate with a bunch of failures from the beginning based on finances or based on the fact that people are just not aware of the fact that there have been significant harms that have been done and continue to be done to Black Californians. We are aware that everyone in the state is watching us, but also everyone in this nation, but also in this world. Because the discussion about reparations is not one that is specific to California, nor is it specific to the United States. You hear about the African countries talking about reparations as well. And they are looking towards California to make sure that we get it right. And so we are very well aware of that. We do not want to come out of the gate with a bunch of vetoes and losses on the floor, because we know that there's a lot of work that we must do and our individual communities and organizations that support us must do so that we can fully implement all of the recommendations within the next 3 to 10 years. So thank you.
Can I follow up just really quick? How did you all pick the priority bills for the caucus versus what individual members would carry outside of those priorities?
So all of the members, it followed a similar process that we have for our normal priority bills each year. So all of the members submitted their bills to the caucus as a whole. We all looked at them, reviewed them, voted on them, and those that got a supermajority were the ones that were selected.
Was there any criteria or something that the caucus is looking for in particular for the priority reparations?
So as was noted from Dr. Jackson, the members of the subgroup, the policy group, had narrowed the bills down to about 30, recognizing that our caucus not only is the subject matter broad, but our caucus has a broad, diverse set of skills and passions and focus areas. So we wanted to ensure that every member had an opportunity to submit something that was, or to carry something that was related to their particular passion or skill set. And so everybody submitted bills, so to speak, as these are the bills I'd like to work on within the reparations task force report. And then those were, like I said, reduced by that policy committee. And then of that policy committee, members voted on the ones that they actually wanted to prioritize and put their full forth effort, not only just co-authoring, principal co-authors, but also in committee, on the floor, with their colleagues, that type of work. Thank you. I think we have here and then here, and that might be it. Okay. Okay, we're gonna do the 4, because we're time. But we have here, 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 and then that's gonna be our last. And everybody had a chance to speak already. Go ahead.
Okay, I just have a follow-up to the direct monetary payment question. The Legislative Analyst Office is forecasting a budget deficit of $30 billion every year for the next several years. You said that the reason you're not going to, for any budget spending requests for reparations is because of the deficit. So does that mean that you'll only be fight for reparations and direct monetary payments when there's a surplus, or are there plans to make that happen even during deficit years?
Just to clarify, and I don't know if you wanted to respond to this as well, but just to clarify, we are operating within a budget deficit. That is a constraint. We have bills that have a fiscal component to them. So that is not the primary driver to our budget package. Part of it, as Dr. Weber stated, is about education to our community and to our colleagues. And so, but yes, the budget constraints are real. We recognize them and we have to operate within them, but it is not the primary driver. It's just a recognition that that is one of our constraints. And one of our primary constraints, really, I would say, is education. We regularly received, when the draft report came out in June of 2022, we were at a budget surplus. And we had colleagues and community members calling us saying, why California? When people think about harm against Black individuals, they think about the South. When they think about violence, they think about the South. When they think about discrimination, they think about the South. When they think about racism, they think about the South. All of that happens right here in California. And it is time that we educate everyone about that. The Reparations Task Force did an amazing job of documenting all of this within the report, and we encourage everyone, including our colleagues, to read it. We are now moving towards implementation, and it will absolutely take some time, and we'll continue to do that work and continue to bring the community along with us. Thank you. Here, and then I think you're our last. Did I say? No, you're last.
Senator Bradford, you had a bill that would create a state agency to kind of oversee these implementations. I'm wondering, just given how hard it is to create an agency, like how necessary is it to kind of have this to put these proposals in place?
I think it's very important. It wasn't hard to create the tribal affairs for our Native American brothers and sisters, so why should it be any harder for creating this agency for African Americans? We've done it before, examples as I stated, so I think it's time for us to step up and have this agency to oversee. We had an agency in 1865, it was called the Freedmen Bureau, that was responsible for the implementation of reparations. And so we need an agency, whether it's in complement to what's already existing. We're not trying to recreate the wheel, but we know we need infrastructure. We need government oversight to do this.
Thank you. Last question?
All right, thank you. Quick question. So are any of these bills based on lineage-based reparations? And if so, which bills would that be?
Are any of the bills, say it again?
Are any of the bills based on lineage-based reparations?
Oh, you mean on African American descent?
Yeah.
Oh, there is one bill that calls specifically out, and that is from Assemblymember Mike Gibson, and it's AB 2862. That one has a direct relation to African descent. All the other bills deal with, they are absolutely recommendations from the task force, but they primarily deal with issues that disproportionately impact African Americans or those from African descent or Black Californians.
Have you had this discussion with Pro Tem McGuire?
We do have to go, but I will just note that we have had a great working collaborative relationship with what we call the Big Three: our governor, our speaker, Rob Rivas, and Senate Pro Tem McGuire. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
I asked Holden to come back. I've never seen 12 of us together.